Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'll do it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good. Welcome to the Unity Spiritual Center, Pflugerville. You know, it's interesting. We're spreading out so much. I think we need to look for another name. Like Pflugerville, Round Rock, Hutto, Austin. That's right. The whole word. We could say Central Texas, couldn't we? Anyway, we're located in Pflugerville, and I appreciate that. And
I'll
our
have to commute from San Antonio.
Say it again.
Pat will have to commute from San Antonio.
Pat's going to commute from San Antonio. Yeah. He's getting more and more pressure to complete his restoration of the house down there, I know. Now, those of you who don't know, he and Virginia bought a house down in San Antonio, right across the street from daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren. And it's, 110 years old?
Wow.
And he is refurbishing it. So you can imagine how much work he has to do. So, Pat, we appreciate you and enjoy San Antonio.
Thank you.
This week I've really been looking at the idea of prayer and the misinformation, if I can use that terminology, that we have brought into today's culture. The word prayer is literally translated from the original Aramaic. The word prayer is used right before the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6. And the word prayer is salom, or translated to set a trap. Now, remember, we're going back, and Jesus was talking to rural people who set traps for animals and those type of things in order to eat. So setting a trap meant creating an environment where you could catch something. Everybody got that? Mm-hmm. Now, in today's world, if you look it up in the dictionary or Google it or do anything with it, it'll tell you it's called begging, asking God for special favors, asking for correction of things, asking for whatever it is. And so so we have these terms: evocative prayer, intercessory prayer, all those terms for prayer which indicate asking. But the original conversation that Jesus was using, and since we're a Christian church, would it be a good idea to listen to what Jesus said? So that's where I'm going. And so the whole idea then was to sit silently, because in Psalms it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Jesus in Matthew 5, talked about prayer, and when he was asked, he said, go into your closet or go into your inner self and lock the door. So what does that mean? It means lock the door, set a state of being to catch God, which makes a lot more sense to me. So it doesn't mean asking, it doesn't mean begging, it doesn't mean getting down on your hands and knees and doing this. It means literally being still. Now, Anne says, sit down, shut up, and be quiet. Okay? Which is the simple process of slowing down, sitting in a chair, closing your eyes, and being one with God. Now, in today's world, we're calling it meditation, centering prayer, all those things. But if you really look at it, what amazed me is looking at it, that this idea of being silent for a period of time is endemic or within most religions in the world. If you take a look at Hindu, you go back 5,000-6,000 years, original Sanskrit language, which as far as we know is one of the root languages, they discussed meditation or silence. You take a look at Buddha and mindfulness. Anybody watch the mindfulness program on the local channel last night? Nobody saw it? So it's a whole hour on mindfulness meditation and how it was worked, and scientifically how it proves that when we're mindful, immune system gets better, life gets better. They had Jewel on there, and they had a broadcaster on there that had been through amazing issues. They learned to meditate quietly and change their life. And so now science is getting involved in this, proving that stillness and silence creates a new state of being. Anybody like to be in a new state of being that works? Mm-hmm. See, that's why we're here. That's why we get together, just to figure this thing out, make it better. And it's difficult for the human being who's full of chatter, meddling all the time, to be still. So we don't feel comfortable with it. However, it's one of the keys to transformation. So if that's true, then what do we do? How do we do it? Where does it come from? Just to take it further, the Buddhists talk about, they do a lot of chanting, they do a lot of stillness, okay? And the mindfulness meditation is sitting quietly. Usually it's 20 to 30 minutes. Isn't it interesting? The centering prayer, which Pat has brought to us, comes from the old Christian monasteries that Father Keating brought out of the monastery into everyday life. Put a structure to it, and the structure is finding a word or sacred word that you feel comfortable with, using that to open, and your intention to open to God, and then bring it slightly into your consciousness for 20 minutes. Now there's more to it, that's why Pat teaches the class. But Kriya Yoga, you know what we learned in Kriya Yoga? Which is a form of Hindu meditation, to find a short meditation or something that's very quiet. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's in the original Sanskrit, so you don't even know what you're saying. But what it does is it keeps you focused on connecting to spirit, which is the same thing that's being taught in centering prayer. Okay, isn't that interesting? And you go over to the Buddhist meditations, same thing. Anybody ever heard of the whirling dervishes?
Yeah.
Okay, and guess what they do? They reach a state of meditation by whirling. Spinning, by the way, it needs to be on your left foot. Okay, and it needs to be so many turns per minute. So there's all these issues or things to approach God. But prayer really literally means direct communion with God. And not asking God for anything other than being in the presence of God. Now, the Bible also says, don't worry because God knows, so you don't have to ask. If you want me to look it up, I will, but it does say that. So that when we go into prayer, we don't need to ask. Wouldn't it be, stop and think about this. Wouldn't the power that runs the universe know what I need or what you need? And no, so I don't need to ask those. As a matter of fact, if I ask, I might even be showing lack of faith. It's an idea I happen to think of. And if you stop and think about it, if we keep asking over and over again, does that show a lack of faith? And the whole connection is connecting to God, knowing that my prayer or my connection will automatically recondition me. But I have to do it over and over again because, or make the connection, because I've been so programmed by the outside world that program needs to be cleansed, cleaned out. So it's a universal issue. Now, what's also interesting, just for kicks, as long as I'm here, prayer is communion with God. And in our world today, learning to be silent and taking into that silence is part of the process. And the techniques that are used are pretty much the same. In other words, in centering prayer, you make up a sacred word that's given to you by Spirit. And over in the Kriya Yoga, you're given a mantra, if you will. In Buddhist, you're given a chant. And it's all that. And it's all a beginning step. It's like in centering prayer, you start centering prayer. Now, anybody ever heard of Nirvana? And Nirvana is in the Buddhist meditation, reaching the point where you make a direct connection with God. In other words, you theoretically leave this physical consciousness and meld with the divine directly. Okay, and Buddha, they call that. Guess what they call it in the Hindus? Samadhi. And you know how it's defined? Leaving the physical awareness and melding with divinity. What does centering prayer say? You leave centering prayer and you enter contemplative prayer. What do the whirling dervishes say? You leave ordinary awareness and you reach perfect. So if you understand it, it has been historical knowledge for centuries. And now these knowledge is coming into our cultures in different ways. So it's important for us to understand those things. Now, there are other things that occur. And there are ways to go deeper, but that's it. We don't go there until we learn how to do that. And it's like anything else. Anybody agree? It takes a while to learn a skill. Okay? Madeline and I dabbled in martial arts for a while. And to reach a black belt took forever and ever and ever. Too long for me. I only got the brown belt, okay? Because I didn't learn all that other stuff. And so I cannot say that I've reached that level, but learning takes time, and it's really reconditioning the mind. Paul said the renewing of the mind, or the renewing, and we know today that we're going to make another step from the mind to the heart. And the heart is the center of the Christ self. So that we're figuring things out, and we're moving into just knowing. Okay? So it's a very, very interesting thing, the prayer. And the title for the article this week was The Simplicity of Prayer. Everybody there? Mm-hmm. So prayer is not complicated. It's really very simple. It's just learning a technique to take you into the silence and sooner or later reaching awareness of who we really are. Of course, of Love this week was talking about the biggest issue we have to deal with is who we are. Okay? It's really fascinating, is who we are. And it says sooner or later we have to realize that we are expression of God. And once we do that, we realize we are creating the world that we are experiencing. See, this is very subtle. This really is. And I've been working on this week because, and you know, I get into the upset about the political situation because I'm aware whenever we get upset about something, guess what we're creating? What we're upset about. So if we don't like Joe Doe and we keep talking about it or obsessing about it, what do we keep creating? Problems for Joe and John Doe and ourselves. So we are the creators of our world. Everybody there? And the world comes at us as we have created it. And we're back to basics again, but I really wanted to make this comment to help us understand, because that's the foundation that's being laid here. You know, Pat and Ginger have done a great job in reading Centering Prayer as a consciousness. And that is, it's happening. You know, there's at least, 15 of us now that have been through that. And there's others that have been through other meditation programs. So that creates an energy of divinity within what we do. Now, not only does that help the church and build that church, it literally creates blocks in the church. Isn't that amazing? You want to talk about woo-woo? Every time you sit down, maybe you create another block in our church. Take a deep breath. Okay, but it's literally that creative that we are. And as a group, we support each other, but each individual, as you spend quiet time, make the direct connection, not asking, just being thankful that I'm in spirit. Okay, things happen for us individually. Okay, now, since, you know, I really keep the idea that we need to look at Fillmore, because Charles Fillmore, where'd you put my glasses? So I decided to look up what Charles Fillmore said. Are you ready? Now, this is the revealing word, and the revealing word is the dictionary of Charles Fillmore's metaphysical terms. And I happened to look up prayer. And prayer is, are you ready? Communion between God and man, or human. So that's it. It's communion between us and God. There isn't anything else, okay? Then it goes on and says, this communion takes place in the innermost part of human's consciousness. It is the only way to cleanse and perfect the being and consciousness and thus permanently heal the body. So it isn't going to God and asking for healing, it's knowing healing has occurred and making the direct communion. So the word for prayer literally means centering prayer, meditation, stillness, quiet. Everybody there? And do you see how this idea of prayer being evocatory or intercessory has entered our culture from the Middle Ages, when words were used from European languages. That's where these definitions of prayer come from the European languages, which mean asking. So everybody okay? It's a big issue. Now, in talking about prayer, what is prayer and what is it not? And what did Jesus say about prayer? I'll get there in a minute. I want to finish this. It says prayer is more than supplication. In other words, it's more than asking. Prayer is an affirmation of the truth that eternally exists. So prayer is really giving thanks. Thank you, Father. Then it goes on and says, do not supplicate or beg God to give you what you need, but get still and think about the inexhaustible resources of the infinite mind of God. Has anybody ever read the business news or read about all of the activity out there that's going on? And this company's buying this company for $10 billion. Somebody's selling a house for $3 million. Somebody's doing this for $2 billion. And that's the amount of money that's flying around all over the place. And it's strictly consciousness that creates that. So rather than worrying about not having money, the idea is pray for an understanding that money is everywhere present. Everything I need is already there. And that is true prayer, is giving thanks and just making direct communication. So if you really, really want to dig into it, and we keep going, I've got more in the Bible. As a matter of fact, Jesus says, don't talk about it. And I'll get there in a minute. Okay? Now it says, it is necessary to pray believing that we have received because God is in all that we desire. So God is ever present. There's an energy for good everywhere around us. And as we pray, it is making connection with that goodness, which is already there, and we don't have to ask for it. All we have to do is open to it. Now, going into, again, and as you know, I spent a lot of time in the Sermon on the Mount. It does say, somewhere, well, I do want to say this is Matthew 6:25, no, 25. For this reason I say to you, do not worry for your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor for your body, what you will wear. Because it is not life much more important than food and the whole body than clothing. Now people just kind of gloss over that idea, but Jesus is saying, don't worry. Make the direct communication and everything else will come together. It's called spontaneous understanding. It says earlier, okay, and it says, this is chapter 6, verse 6, but as for you, when you pray, enter your inner chamber, okay, and lock your door and pray to your Father who is in secret. So it's very clearly saying, sit down, shut up, be quiet, go within, and pray in secret. Then it goes on and says, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not repeat your words like the pagans, for they think that because of much talking they will be heard. Hello? Can I read this again? Everybody take a deep breath. You ready? Okay. And when you pray, do not repeat your words like the pagans. Now, that's just those other people, right? And it says, for they think that because of much talking, they will be heard. Anybody agree when an audience listens to you and you need to talk? See, the ego wants to talk. The ego wants to fill the air with, I was going to say BS, but I won't go there. But that's what we do. We have to feel good about what we're saying. So Jesus is saying very clearly, pray within yourself. Now, here in Unity, when we do meditations, we're setting a stage. In other words, we're setting the trap. When Pat or Valerie or Larry says, let's take a deep breath, that's setting the trap to be open to God. And then the suggestion is to go into that space where God is present. So it's not prayer, it's meditation or preparation for meditation. So it's a very, very interesting conversation. Now, is this controversial? Yes. So everybody take a deep breath. But the key to it is, we are following spiritual principles. And the truth is, I keep looking at the principles and how far away we've gotten from them in our day-to-day world. Okay, now how does it happen? Because the ego mind wants to take over and analyze things, and then the smart people come up with new ideas and then change the ideas into what they think. but there's a base root of spiritual knowledge here. And what's interesting is it repeats itself in other areas, okay? Now it says more, let me see what else it says. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. And then it goes on to say, therefore pray in this manner, and then we hear the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer starts off by praising God and then setting a trap for God. So He follows that outline in everything that has occurred. So I encourage you, here's what I want you to do. Pick up your Bible and read it. And stay in the Sermon on the Mount for a while, because it's amazing what's in here. So, now we go there, and I should take a look at my notes. But the idea of this is, we are creators of the world we experience, and all lasting and permanent change takes place on the inside. In other words, if I am creating my world, then I can't change the world out here, I have to change the world in here, and I'll see a different world out there. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I'm in prayer or communion with God, the inside changes according to God's will, not my will, and then I start seeing God's will on the outside of me. Does that make sense? And we have these guidelines, that's why guidelines are important. However, the major basic key is quiet, silence, inviting God into our consciousness. And then, last of all, back here, okay? Prayer is direct communion with God, ultimately reality. And I like the term ultimate reality because that's the term that means everything that's possible in all ways, under all conditions, knows what I need and knows what you need. And wouldn't it be interesting? Because I think I might want I don't know, Volkswagen, but ultimate reality wants me to have a Mercedes. I don't know that, and I just use that as an example because you don't know what your Father has for you. And if we let go and stop trying to run the cotton picking thing and make a direct connection with God, things start happening. And we start building churches. Notice how I keep going back to that. And my last phrase is, really what we're talking about is learning how to create an environment within ourselves where we interact with the subtle energies that are running the universe. Because anybody figure out the universe works? I mean, if you look at it, they can predict the tide of an ocean within a mile down in Corpus Christi of when it's going to be high and when it's going to be low for the next 100 years. Why? Because everything is in a pattern that's perfect. Everything works. And we as human beings have been given free will, and who are the ones that mess it up? Because we make different choices. So it's learning to surrender, if you will. We talked about the 4 stages of awareness, where the first stage is I'm a victim, and I'm in victim mentality. The next step is empowerment, when I start realizing I can pray, or I can start using affirmations. Third step is surrender, learning to let go and stop trying to run things. Fourth level is awakening. And where we are going to is awakening, and I believe we're in the surrender process. So, I want to thank Pat and Ginger for bringing Center and Prayer in. It's kind of like a beginning. And we've had some interesting things occur in some of our workshops this week. Things happen when you start doing meditation, and it takes you to another level. And some of you are reaching levels that you haven't had before. So I'm excited about that occurring within the church. I really am. And the Sunday morning study group's picking up a new book, which I'm excited about. So good things are happening, folks. And as we surrender and make that direct connection, our lives start working better, and the community's lives start working better. And as the Course of Love says, we've got to stop recreating the old and create the new. We're in a new world, we're in a new way of thinking, and things aren't the way they used to be. So we are entering a new world that we are creating through love. Thank you for that, and I appreciate you doing that. Namaste.